And Michael, that is a lot to unpack and a very dramatic tone to take. What exactly in your mind does that so-called Powell exit trade look like potentially for U.S.-based assets?
Well, good morning to you, Dom, from London. I agree it is dramatic, but I think that really does describe the likely market move that we would see if Powell were to be ousted. Now, I think perhaps participants aren't necessarily taking Trump's threats quite seriously enough on that front, given how he is a little bit akin to a dog with a bone. When he gets one of these things in his mind, he doesn't tend to let it go. And if we were to see the president threaten the independence of the Fed as an institution like that, you're really talking about the haven value and the reserve status of particularly treasuries and the US dollar being eroded very significantly in very rapid fashion, probably forever, because once that institutional trust has been demolished, it's almost impossible for it to be rebuilt again over any sort of realistic time period.
Michael, our sitting Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, has echoed what pretty much every Treasury Secretary before him has echoed, that the U.S. is still the world's best market, that the U.S. dollar is still a reserve currency, and that we are still the place that people turn to when it comes to the deepest, most liquid markets, and that the U.S. dollar should be a strong currency. All of these things are coming from the administration. So is there any real fear that the U.S. would lose its reserve status or that treasuries would become a less desirable asset?
Well, I think there is, because for the time being, at the very least, the actions of the administration don't appear to be backing up the words of the administration, certainly the Treasury Secretary in public. And as you alluded to earlier on, we've seen this sort of sell America trade take place for a number of weeks now, where treasuries are losing ground, the dollar is rolling over, and participants are rotating into other geographies around the world. Now, I think it's important to recognize that this sort of paradigm shift is something that wouldn't take place overnight or wouldn't take place in a couple of trading sessions. It's the sort of change in environment that would pan out over months, if not years. And also, of course, it's not just the matter of is Powell going to be fired or not. There's also the consideration of who replaces Powell as the next Fed chair and what degree of independence do they have from the administration. I think that's something else that participants are going to start to consider in quite some depth later in the year when we get some names in the hat as to who might take over come next May, assuming, of course, Powell serves out his term, as I think he probably will.
Let's say, hypothetically, there is this kind of move, this kind of shifting view about exerting political pressure on central banks. It may not just be here in the U.S., right? You could, if this hypothetically becomes successful, could you see more political pressure brought to bear in other central banks and political regimes around the world as well?
Well, I think it's certainly a distinct possibility. If the United States do go down that path, then the resistance, so to speak, that's stopping other governments around the world from doing so is probably much less than it is at the moment. Of course, I think we all know that it would be slightly foolish for the monetary policy independence of developed market central banks to be eroded. But it is certainly something worth considering, because once the US has done that, and if it were to prove, more successful than we think it likely to do so, then maybe there is less to stop other governments around the world from thinking that's a good idea, let's copy it. And of course, if that were to happen, we're sort of examining a scenario where it's only the United States that crosses that line. If other governments were to do so as well, then that's really where things like gold would start to come into their own as havens, even more than it is at the moment.